Welcome to the Public Issues Leadership Development Pre-Conference webinar. I am Diana Rashash, and I will be your hostess during this. You will also get to hear from Lila Hoagland a little bit further along in this presentation. Our agenda today is to review the PILD program and the experience that you will be having when you come to DC, introduction to our key speakers, preparing for those very important Hill visits, and any questions and answers that you may have. We do have a very representative committee. We have 2 people from each of the 7 sister associations for extension, as well as Terry Mayhew as our conference chair-elect. And again, I am Diana Rashash, and I am the conference chair for the 2017 PILD. We also have several other representatives to our planning committee, Bill Hoffman and Lisa Loxman with USDA NIFA, Lila Hoagland with the Western Extension Directors Association, L. Washington Lyons with the administrative team, executive director. Cynthia Gregg is the current president of the Joint Council of Extension Professionals, and Bob Olin-Salen is our executive director. And if you have been registering for the conference and asking questions, Bob is that person who directs you where you need to go. I've mentioned JCEP, that is the Joint Council of Extension Professionals. You see here those 7 sister associations that make up that council. To help you put faces to the names, you see me. You will also get to see Cynthia Gregg at the conference. And to get there, we want to make sure, have you secured your plane ticket? Time is getting short. It's not too long from now until it is April 2nd. Have you found a roommate and made your hotel reservations? We have had several requests from people who are after both a roommate and a room. If you are after a roommate or a roommate and a room, please contact Bob Olin-Salen at his JCEP office at jcep.org email address. Make sure you have registered for PILD. The early bird rate has closed. The regular registration rate is currently open. It is also important to arrange for your Hill visits, and Lila Hoagland will be discussing that more in a few minutes. The theme for this year's conference is Relationships, Relevance, Results. Very timely topics for extension these days. And our conference hotel is the Hyatt Regency in Crystal City. If you need additional information about PILD, you can find that at the jcep.org website. There is a PILD conference tab that has a lot of different information on there, such as finding a roommate, the conference agenda, preparing for your visit to DC, and a whole lot of other information. As well as you can see some of these other tabs that you can go to try to get information about PILD. But the jcep.org is definitely the first place to go to. The Ronald Reagan or DCA airport is probably the most convenient. There is also a free shuttle from the airport to the hotel. Dulles is about 30 miles away, and Baltimore or BWI is closer to 40 miles away. If you need to ship anything to the hotel, here is the hotel address to use. You can also telephone them, especially if you're sending something. They may have recommendations on not sending it prior to a certain date. There are alternatives for ground transportation. You see the crystalcity.hyatt.com website to go to. You could also take a cab from either Dulles or Baltimore, Washington airports. If you take a cab from Reagan, it would cost you about $20. Please don't forget there is still that free Hyatt shuttle. That courtesy shuttle does go by on a rotational basis, so depending on whether you are coming out of Terminal A or Terminal C would determine what area you would be picking it up at. In both cases, it is outside of baggage claim. Some of you who have been to DC in the past may have the Smart Trip card from those prior visits. I have two, because last year I forgot to bring mine from the prior year, so I had to buy a second one. So please, if you have one in the past, go ahead and dig it on out, put it in a safe place so that you do remember to bring it with you. If you don't have one and you're going to want to get one so that you can take the metro from Crystal City into DC to visit the Hill or go through the various monument areas, it is just a short walk away from the hotel, and you can purchase your card at that location. If you are at the First Timers Orientation meeting on Sunday, April 2nd, we do take a walk that goes to the metro, and you'll have an opportunity to buy your smart card at that time. As far as dress goes, Sunday, it's your travel day. We do want you to be comfortable. Same thing with the First Timers Orientation. We will be walking to the metro and back. You will also be getting to go on your evening tour. We've had some wacky weather. I call this our roller coaster weather these days. It could be 75 or it could be 35. You might want to double check the forecast before you go, and also make sure you have plenty of layers. Last year it was rather chilly for the evening tour. I was happy I did have my layers on. Make sure you do have comfortable, walkable shoes. Monday, daytime, business professional. Evening, depends on what your activities are. If you're going out with your association group, and what activities that they have planned. Tuesday, daytime, again, is business professional. Evening, most likely casual, and again, based on your activities with States Nights Out. Wednesday, definitely business professional and comfortable walking shoes. Lila will be talking about some of your options with that a little bit later. So getting around DC, the metro is a great way to do it. You can also go ahead and, if you have a smartphone, there are various apps that you can use. I cannot attest to having used any of those. I do not have a smartphone. Monday night out is association night out. Volunteers, directors, and administrators are also able to get together. We will have them meet down in the lobby to form into dining groups if desired. So if there are any volunteers, directors, or administrators that do not belong to part of a larger group and don't wish to go out on their own, we'd be happy to have them with us. When you get out there, make sure that your watch reflects the current time zone. We begin with registration opening at 1:30 p.m. on Sunday, April 2nd. As I mentioned before, we do have the First Timers Orientation. It's scheduled here from 2:30 to 5. We do not expect it to take the full 2.5 hours. Part of it will be in the hotel. There is a room assigned for that. And then there's going to be the walking tour to the metro. That also gives those going on the Twilight Tour an opportunity to stop at a restaurant on the way back to grab something to eat prior to going on that Twilight Tour. Monday, registration opens at 7 a.m. There will also be a breakfast down in the plenary session room. Then you will have the welcome from Cynthia and I saying thank you for coming to PILD. Our keynote speaker is Marshall Stewart. I'll be talking about what he's going to be talking about in just a little bit, followed by Fred Schlut, our ECOP chair, Sunny Ramaswamy, the director of NIFA, Ronnie McDonald from Texas will also be giving a keynote, and then we have our various luncheons. There are two. One is the main luncheon that most of you will be attending, and then there's the JSEP ECOP NIFA luncheon that will be by invitation. So our first keynote speaker is Dr. Marshall Stewart, formerly at NCSU. A wonderful gentleman, very good at getting our message across. He's very fond of that 30-second elevator speech. So if you have that opportunity between one floor and the next to be able to tell somebody what it is you do. Ronnie McDonald is rather interesting. I'm looking forward to hearing from him. He has a past as a county judge, and he is quite a storyteller. Continuing on with the Monday afternoon agenda, we have our 2 breakout sessions where you will have your choice among a variety of presentations by your peers. During the second breakout session is also when the extension directors will be meeting in a separate location. Following a quick break, we will then be hearing from Marshall Stewart and Ronnie McDonald again as they hold an Articulating Your Message workshop. Again, helping you to make sure you're able to get your message across for both extension personnel and our volunteers. That evening is association night out and our volunteers, directors, administrators nights out. And the NEAFCS and the 4-H associations have scheduled some meetings later on. You will be hearing from your association representatives about that. Tuesday morning registration, if you have not registered, if you're coming in late, will be on 7 a.m. Tuesday morning. There will also be breakfast again in the plenary session room. Then we have our NIFA morning. We did listen to everybody and the recommendations from prior conferences on wanting to hear more NIFA information. So we start off with Bill Hoffman giving a NIFA overview. Then we'll have presentations on the capacity and competitive programs as well as on grant writing and submission. Both of those were by request. During the grant writing and submission session, there's also a volunteer session. Administrators are welcome to that, where we'll be hearing from Dr. Chuck Hibbard. A little later that morning, we have our regular NPL or National Program Leaders sessions. You will have your choice of 6 sessions, and you get to choose one. Then it's on to lunch. After lunch, we get to hear the skits from Cornerstone and the ECOP Budget and Legislative Committees. We will also get to hear from a pair of Senate staffers on a day of a staffer. So that should be quite interesting. We will also then get to hear a presentation by our CapNote speaker, Attorney John Dillard. After all of those presentations, you then get to have your state planning time to finish polishing your message, figuring out who is saying what, and preparing for Wednesday. And then you'll get to enjoy your state's night out. So a little bit more information about our speakers. John Dillard is with a law firm in DC. He's an associate attorney, very focused on agriculture. As I mentioned, Wednesday are those congressional visits. If you have any free time, the mall area has a variety of locations you can go to, such as the Smithsonian museums, gardens, or wandering around the monuments. Hopefully it'll be some wonderful weather and you will have that opportunity. And now for Lila, so she can tell you more about preparing for your Hill visit.
Thanks, Diana. What I'm going to do is talk with you about the Wednesday of PIL. This is a very important day, and it is a unique day that many of you will think about and will think back on for many years to come. The first thing you need to do in preparing for Wednesday of PIL and the Hill visits is you need to make appointments. Now, when you're making appointments, or before you start making appointments, one of the things that you need to do is go and talk with your university federal relations person and your extension director or administrator, so they're aware that you are going to be making appointments and meeting with members of the Hill. on the Hill. Very often when you contact your federal relations person on your campus, they will either help you make appointments or perhaps will make the appointments for you in order to coordinate that whole schedule. And so it's a really good idea to make sure that they, regardless of whether they make the appointments for you or not, it's a good idea to make sure that they know that you are planning to do this. Now, one of the things that's really critical about this is in a few cases, our institutions do not allow their faculty and staff members to make appointments with and visit with members of their congressional delegation. So before you do anything about making appointments for Wednesday, be sure to talk to your federal relations person at your institution, at your university. And then again, make sure your extension director or administrator is aware so that he or she can give you some advice about that. One of the other things that's important about this is make sure you designate one person to make all the appointments. It might seem easier to you to divide up the workload and between the members of your team if you have multiple people on your team, but in reality, in order to schedule the appointments, you need to have one person who's designated to do that, pay attention to it, be the contact person for the team. 2 to 3 weeks out is a good lead time for checking with your Hill staff and for the Hill staff to check with their members' calendars. So now is the time to go ahead and do that. Now, one of the things you may find is that you need to be flexible about this and about the calendars, because you might make an appointment today with a member of Congress and then a few days down the road, or even the day that you arrive in Washington, D.C., you may get a message indicating that that's not a good time or the calendar needs to be changed. Again, another good reason to designate one person who's going to be making those appointments for you, regardless of whether it's a member of your team, whether it's your university federal relations person, or whomever it is, to designate one person in order to do that. So on the next slide, it talks about the kinds of things to bring to your appointment. This is a very good example of when less is more. In other words, a lot of times what I see is people bring fairly large, fairly substantial packets of information that they want to give to their members of Congress. The bottom line is packets are cumbersome to be carrying around, and chances are very good that they will not be read. If you bring 1 or 2 pages of information that represents your entire extension program, including 4-H, agriculture, natural resources, family, consumer sciences, whatever it is you do in your extension program, include all of that on a 1 to 2 page information sheet. That will be enough. Include on that sheet what kind of impact you're having from your local programs. And it's also a really good idea to include some photos. You all know what it's like to get a very dense black and white sheet of paper that's only print. It's a lot more inviting to get something that has bullets and pictures and those kinds of things. That's easy and quick read. So take that into account when you're putting something together. Also make it relevant to your member of Congress. One of the things that you'll want to do, I think this is on one of the future slides, but let me mention it here anyway, is before you go, you'll want to find out what the personal interests are of that particular member of Congress, and make sure that the information that you're talking with them about is relevant to them. The meeting will be much more effective and it will be much more meaningful if you make it relevant to that particular member of Congress. So in this case in particular, the kinds of things to bring, we will, by the way, be giving you or providing for you a copy of the federal budget request for extension and the experiment station at NIFA. And so we will provide that 1-page handout to you when you get to PILD. But what you should prepare is a 1 to 2 page information sheet that represents extension at your institution, that includes impacts, that includes photos, and make it relevant to your member of Congress. As you prepare for your meetings, have a plan about what it is you want to share, who's going to share it, who's going to start the meeting, and those kinds of things. Now, this can change for each one of your meetings if you want, or it can stay the same for each one of your meetings, depending upon what works best for your team. But have a plan before you go in. Especially have a plan for who's going to take the lead in this meeting. So you're not sitting around sort of looking at each other once you get into the meeting, trying to figure out, well, who's going to start. Have that plan figured out ahead of time. Have a plan figured out about who's going to say what. And remember, and this is something that we'll talk about more when you're at PILD, some of you are allowed to lobby, some of you are not allowed to lobby. If you are a faculty or staff member, it's likely that you are not allowed to lobby. But if you are a volunteer or you're bringing a volunteer with you, that person is allowed to lobby. Now, during the PILD conference, we're going to talk about, what's the difference between lobbying and educating, if you will, your members of Congress. Because all of you, it doesn't matter whether you are an employee or not an employee, all of you have a responsibility to educate members of Congress and other decision makers. So go into the meetings with a plan. Know who's going to start, know who's going to say what, and what pieces of information you're going to bring up at each meeting. And again, the meetings might be slightly different depending upon the specific interests of that particular member of Congress. One of the other things that you'll find is in some cases, you will be meeting with people who don't know a lot about extension. So be prepared to say something about extension. That might be one of your first questions when you get into your meeting, is to ask the person that you're meeting with, if they're familiar with land-grant universities and with the extension program at your institution. If they say, well, no, not really, then you should be prepared to give them a little bit of background information about this is extension, this is what we do, this is who we are, and why we care about these kinds of things. If the response is yes, yes, I know a lot about extension, I've gone to a lot of extension meetings and those kinds of things, then you probably don't need to spend much time there. So know who you're talking to, if at all possible. Know what kinds of committees they serve on, what kinds of assignments they have in Washington, D.C., and etc. Also, as you go to the next slide, keep in mind some things like an appointment with a staff member, with a staffer, should not be taken lightly. Oftentimes what happens, especially if you have not been to the Hill before, you call, you make an appointment, you think you have an appointment with your member of Congress, you get there, and there's this very young person sitting there across from you, and you're thinking to yourself, wait a minute, that's not my member of Congress. Who is this kid? Well, the bottom line is this kid may in fact be very young, but they are the people who advise their elected officials. So treat them with utmost respect. Do not take them lightly. If the things that you say are not, if they believe that you're just sort of blowing them off, then that's the kind of information they're going to pass on to their elected official. So talk with them as if you're talking with your elected official. 99% of the time, what you will be doing is you will be meeting with a member of their staff. In fact, a lot of times it will be, for extension, it will be their agricultural staff member or the person in charge of the agricultural part of their agenda. So pay attention to that and treat those folks with respect. They will decide what they're going to pass on and what they're not going to pass on to their member of Congress. So during the meeting, this is just kind of a brief outline. Be sure to introduce all the members of your group, but do it very briefly, because one of the things that you will learn is you may have a 15-minute appointment, but that 15-minute appointment might actually get moved down to 5 minutes or 2 minutes at the last minute if something happens. So make sure your introductions are brief, stay on topic, tell your story, why you're there, briefly review the materials that you've provided for them. Be sure to thank your elected official for their service and their staff members for their service. And be sure to allow time, adequate time for them to ask questions. one other thing that's always appropriate is photos, in fact, are appropriate. Members of your elected officials, members of Congress, like having photos with their constituents. In fact, what you might do when you get back home is take that photo and send it to your local newspaper, because that helps both the local newspaper, it helps you to provide some visibility for extension, and it provides your elected official an opportunity to be seen by local constituents. Then thank them, be sure to thank them before you leave again, and also leave your business card. This is something that you'll want to remember to do before you leave for Washington, D.C., and that is pick up a stack of your business cards. You'll need one for the person at the front desk, the scheduler. You'll need one for whomever it is you meet with. You might need another one for the person who takes you to meet with the person you're meeting with, and so on. So be sure to leave home with a stack of business cards so that everyone that you talk with has a copy of your business card along with the materials that you have prepared. So just a note about Capitol Life, and I've mentioned this a little bit already. You need to be flexible. There might, in fact, be changes right up to the very minute of your meeting or right before the meeting. You might even go into the meeting, and then 2, 3, 5 minutes into the meeting, the elected official gets called out for another meeting or gets called out to go to vote on the floor or something like that. So just be prepared. Don't be offended when things like that happen. It happens all the time. This is a very dynamic environment, so you need to be flexible. The other thing that might happen is you might get there and your elected official says, I've just been called to another meeting. Can you walk with me to the elevator? And that's all the time you have with them. So if that happens, again, be prepared. And Diana made a comment earlier about your 30-second elevator speech. Have that in your hip pocket so that you, in fact, are ready for that. Getting around on Capitol Hill, Diana has talked a little bit about the metro already, the train system. It is a very good and very efficient system in Washington, D.C. The 2 metro stations that are closest to the House buildings and Senate buildings are listed on this slide. Capitol South Metro Station is closest to the House buildings, and Union Station is closest to the Senate buildings. The next slide shows just simply pictures of the various, these are the House buildings, Cannon, Longworth, Rayburn, and Ford. There are 4 buildings that house offices for members of the House. These buildings do have, I believe, tunnels between them, but when you go in the first time, you will need to go through security in these buildings. If you go through the tunnels to another building, you shouldn't have to go back through security. But if you ever leave the building, you will have to go back through security in order to get back in. The next slide shows the Senate buildings, Russell, Hart, and Dirksen. Now, one of the things also to keep in mind, and if you go to the next slide, which is a snapshot of Capitol Hill, this might not look like they're that far apart, but they are quite a ways apart. Blocks in Washington, D.C. are very far away. Diana has just circled the Senate buildings that are at the top of the map. The House buildings are at the bottom of the map. The Capitol is right in between. So there's, again, it's quite a walk between these 2 sets of buildings. So give yourself plenty of time. When you're going from the House to the Senate, I would recommend you give yourself at least 30 minutes, maybe closer to 45 minutes to an hour in order to get not only across, but again through security, because if you walk into another building, you're going to have to go through security. So this just gives you a little bit of an idea of the layout of Capitol Hill. Then the next slide, again, is simply an aerial view of the mall area. And you can see the Capitol there in the middle with the Senate buildings on the right-hand side, the House buildings on the left-hand side.
Hang on, it's not letting me advance anymore. So see if I try to be fancy again.
Okay. Not advancing.
No, hang on. Let me get it to do it. Sorry, folks. Aha. Can you see my screen? Or do I have to go back to
I
share
don't see a
screen?
slide.
There we go. Thank you all.
Okay. Okay, now let's go to the next slide, Diana. There you go. There's the aerial view of the Capitol Mall area. So, okay, some personal preparations. Diana has talked already a little bit about the kinds of things to wear. The day that you go on the Hill, be sure that you are professionally dressed. No jeans, no t-shirts, especially nothing with political or, for that matter, any other messages. Just, you know, wear professional clothing. And this is a good day to wear very, very comfortable walking shoes. You will be walking a lot. You'll be walking a lot on marble and on concrete and on pavement. And so make sure you take good, easy walking shoes. Also, I've mentioned just a little bit about security and getting through security. Any building that you go into on the mall, including the Smithsonian buildings, you will be required to go through security. Think about it very much the same way as airport security. It may not be quite as detailed as that, but think about it in that way. Everything will have to go through scanners. Good idea to not have any sealed boxes or envelopes. Clearly no weapons of any size. Food and bottled water, beverages, those kinds of things. I would say don't try to take them through. Every one of these buildings has a cafeteria or something like that in the basement of the building, so you can get things to eat, you can get water and those kinds of things in each of the buildings. So on the next slide.
And it's doing it again. I am so sorry.
Well, as Diana is finding the next slide or getting it to advance, let me just say that it really focuses on follow-up once you get back home. Once you get back home, be sure to send a follow-up thank you note or email message to everybody that you worked with, to the person who scheduled appointments for you. Be sure to thank them again for their service, thank them for meeting with you. Follow up on any questions that you might have gotten that you didn't know responses to. That is a real important piece. So when you're in the meetings and you happen to get a question that you really don't know how to respond to, just admit that and say, you know, I don't really know the answer to that. Let me do some searching and I'll get back to you. Or if they ask for information that you don't happen to have with you or you don't happen to have off the top of your head, just simply indicate that you will follow up with them when you get back home, and make sure you do that. Don't agree to follow up on something and then blow it off once you get back home. Really important to follow up on those things. The other thing to do in terms of follow-up once you get back home is make sure that you contact the local office of your member of Congress once you get back home and follow up with them there. This will be a good opportunity for you to see them in your home environment, for them to see you in their home environment as well. And you can also, this is also a good time to invite them to prominent extension programs or events that might be happening in the future. So be sure to pay attention to some of those follow-up items once you get back home. Then communicating with them throughout the year is also a very good idea. So with that, let me just stop there. And Diana, any parting comments? Well, let me just say this before I turn it back to you totally, Diana. We really want this to be both a learning experience for you and a fun experience for you. So have fun with it. Don't be uptight about it. These people are just people, just like all the rest of us. As my dad used to say, they put their pants on one leg at a time, just like everybody else. And so, you know, be straight with them, be attentive with them. be courteous and respectful of them, but also have some fun while you're there. If you have some time between your interviews, spend some time at some of the Smithsonian buildings and some of the monuments that are down in this area. It's a wonderful opportunity to really get the flavor of and have an experience with your nation's capital. So with that, Diana, let me just turn it back to you.
Thank you very much, Lila. And sorry, everybody, well, I was impersonating a loose nut behind the keyboard. It does say if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box that applied for when we did this as a live version. Since this is the recorded version of this, if you do have any questions, Bob Olensalen at the JSEP office at jsep.org would be the key person to contact about anything regarding conference registration or hotel or getting a roommate. If you have any other questions, you could always try contacting me, Diana Rashash, Lila, or Cynthia Gregg. You can find us at the jsep.org website. When you look at the board members, it lists who we are and how to contact us. We are looking forward to seeing you there at PILD on April 2nd. There's just under 300 of you that will be coming, so we're looking forward to a very successful conference. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you in April.